It was a Saturday morning, and I was sprawled on the couch, half-conscious, wearing my favorite ratty hoodie and a pair of pajama pants that had seen better days. The only thing on my mind was crushing a few more levels of my new video game before anyone could bother me. But that illusion of peace shattered the second someone started banging on the front door like they were trying to break it down. I jumped, almost throwing my controller across the room. When I peered through the peephole, two men stood outside wearing cheap polo shirts with HOA Inspector patches that looked like they had been ironed on 5 minutes ago. One of them had a clipboard and the other kept adjusting what was clearly a fake earpiece, like a kid pretending to be a secret agent. My first thought was to ignore them, but curiosity got the better of me. Maybe it was important. Maybe the HOA really had some emergency. Against my better judgment, I opened the door a crack. Before I could even say a word, the taller one shoved his foot between the door and the frame and barked, "Mandatory inspection. HOA orders. Let us in." I blinked, stunned. Mandatory inspection? No emails, no calls, no notice? Still half asleep, I stammered. Are you sure? I haven't heard anything about this." The clipboard guy flipped through some blank papers and gave me a smirk that screamed, "Trust me, bro." Without another word, they pushed past me into the house, moving fast like they already knew the layout. That's when my gut told me something was seriously wrong. The tall guy immediately started wandering down the hallway toward the bedrooms while the other pretended to examine the light fixtures. They weren't taking notes. They weren't asking relevant questions. Instead, they poked through things they had no business touching. One opened the hall closet and rifled through coat. The other tried the locked basement door and muttered something about it needing to be code compliant. I stood frozen for a moment, heart hammering. This wasn't an inspection. This was a setup. And these guys were way too comfortable being somewhere they didn't belong. I remembered the small button hidden under the kitchen counter, the silent alarm my mom had installed years ago, just in case. My thumb itched to reach it, but I needed a distraction first. Thinking fast, I loudly announced, "I'll just go grab my HOA paperwork folder," and dashed toward the kitchen, pretending to rummage through a drawer while carefully sliding my hand underneath the counter. I pressed the button. Once, twice, 3 times. That meant real trouble. Somewhere in the basement, my mom would see the signal on her monitors. If these guys thought they picked the right house, they had no idea how wrong they were. Clipboard guy wandered into the living room and started picking up small electronics, turning them over as if calculating their resale value. I plastered on my best fake smile and asked, "So, what exactly are you inspecting for today? Is there like a pool noodle crime wave happening?" The guy chuckled awkwardly, clearly not expecting me to joke. He muttered something about unauthorized outdoor modifications before shifting uncomfortably. I caught him eyeing my dad's vintage stereo system like a hyena sizing up a wounded animal. Meanwhile, his buddy had started jiggling the locked basement door again, harder this time. He banged on it twice with his palm, frustrated, then pulled something shiny from his pocket. It took me a second to realize it was a Slim Jim, the kind used to break into cars and, apparently, anything else that was locked. Panic twisted in my gut, but I kept my face blank. I needed to buy time. I coughed loudly and said, "Hey, the basement's off limits. Mold issues. Probably not good for inspectors." The tall guy flashed a grin full of fake teeth and shrugged. "We'll be quick." Downstairs, my mom was already in motion. Screens blinked to life. She watched the live feeds from every security camera in the house. She saw the fake inspectors, their clumsy break-in attempts, their ridiculous fake badges. Calm as ever, she grabbed her tactical vest from the back of her chair, clipped her real FBI badge onto her belt, and holstered her sidearm. She checked her phone. 3 taps meant serious trouble. No more playing nice. I checked my phone under the counter, seeing a single text from Mom. "Stay calm. Stall them. Showtime in 60 seconds. Clipboard guy leaned over the kitchen island, trying to sneak a look at the drawers, while tall guy decided to just kick at the basement door with the heel of his boot. I coughed again, louder, almost theatrically. Hey, if you're gonna break my mom's door, can you at least leave a Yelp review afterward? Clipboard guy barked a laugh despite himself and muttered, "Smartass kid." But the tension was rising. They were getting reckless, desperate. And then, just as tall guy gave one last brutal kick to the basement door, it flew open, but not because of him. Standing in the doorway, framed by the dim basement light, was my mom. And she wasn't smiling. She had her Glock pointed squarely at the intruders, her FBI badge shining bright under the overhead light. "Federal agent," she barked. "Hands where I can see them. Now." The entire mood shifted in an instant. Clipboard guy dropped the tablet he was holding, and it clattered to the floor like a gunshot. Tall guy froze, hands halfway in the air, eyes wide with pure, dumb terror. I had to bite the inside of my cheek not to burst out laughing. Mom's backup team stormed in from the front door and the side yard, tactical gear gleaming, radios crackling. One agent cuffed clipboard guy so fast it made my head spin. The tall guy tried to argue, stammering something about inspections and authorized entry, but Mom shut him down cold. "You just broke and entered into a federal surveillance site, genius. You're lucky you're not getting charged with espionage." I leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed, as one of the agents read them their rights. It was better than any movie I could have streamed that morning. These clowns had no idea they'd just broken into the wrong house. The one house in the entire neighborhood that wasn't just protected by an alarm system, but by a fully operational FBI sting. As they were marched out in handcuffs, clipboard guy gave me one last look, half hate, half pure disbelief, as if still trying to understand how their easy target turned into their worst nightmare. I just gave him a cheerful little wave and said, "Thanks for inspecting our hospitality." Mom holstered her weapon, turned to me, and gave a smirk that could have cut steel. "Next time someone knocks pretending to be HOA," she said, "we answer the door with a warrant." And that was just the beginning. Would you like me to continue with Chapter 2 also in the same high-quality, gripping, non-repetitive style? Ready when you are. After the fake inspectors were loaded into the back of the black FBI SUVs parked on our driveway, the house felt strangely quiet, like the moment after a thunderclap when your ears are still ringing. I just stood there, still clutching my phone, trying to process what had just happened. 1 minute I was dodging their weird questions about unauthorized decorative rocks, and the next my mom was standing there like something out of an action movie. She holstered her gun and scanned the house one more time with that intense, sharp gaze she always had when she was working. I could tell she wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. Mom motioned for me to follow her as she disappeared back down into the basement. I trailed her cautiously, feeling like a kid being called into the principal's office. When I hit the bottom step, the sight before me made my jaw drop. The basement didn't look like a basement at all. It looked like a high-tech command center. There were half a dozen monitors flickering with camera feeds from inside and outside the house, a giant corkboard covered in pictures and maps, and shelves stacked with gear I definitely wasn't supposed to touch. In the center of it all was her main desk, cluttered with files, photographs, and something that looked suspiciously like a federal arrest warrant. Mom tapped a few keys on one of the computers and pulled up a feed showing the fake inspectors casing the neighborhood days earlier, lurking around mailboxes and peeking into backyard fences. She didn't say anything for a minute, just let the images speak for themselves. Finally, she turned to me with a look that was half apology, half pride. "I didn't tell you everything," she said. "I needed to keep you acting naturally. But we've been running surveillance on a burglary ring using fake HOA inspections as a front. And today, you helped us catch 2 of their top people." I blinked, trying to absorb it all. So this wasn't just random. The silent alarm wasn't just a paranoid precaution. Mom hadn't been working extra hours at the bureau, doing paperwork like she claimed. She'd been right here, living a double life in our own basement. She smiled a little at my shocked expression, ruffling my hair like I was still 12 years old. You did good. Stayed calm. Didn't tip them off. That's textbook field work. Somewhere deep inside, a part of me swelled with pride, even though my brain was still trying to catch up. So, what now? I asked. Mom's smile faded slightly. Now we dig deeper. They wouldn't have risked breaking into this house unless they were desperate, which means their operation might be bigger than we thought. She spun a monitor toward me, displaying a list of nearby addresses with weird notes like pool toy violation and lawn overgrowth fine. It didn't take a genius to realize the fake inspectors had been using phony HOA violations to get inside multiple homes. I watched as she pulled up a map dotted with red pins. At least a dozen houses in the neighborhood had been hit recently, but not robbed immediately. Instead, it looked like the intruders planted tiny surveillance devices, probably to learn homeowners' schedules and security weaknesses. A slow, cold anger started building in my chest. These people weren't just burglars. They were methodical, patient, planning something bigger. Mom's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and nodded. Backup's moving in. They're sweeping the neighborhood now. She grabbed a small device from a drawer. It looked like a cross between a metal detector and a Geiger counter, and handed it to me. Walk with me. Let's find out what else they left behind. We went upstairs, sweeping room by room. The detector beeped wildly near the front window. Mom pulled aside a curtain and found a tiny black button camera glued to the frame, barely visible unless you knew exactly what to look for. She carefully detached it using tweezers, dropping it into an evidence bag like she was handling live explosive. In the laundry room, another camera buzzed from behind the dryer. Near the garage, we found a second listening device tucked behind a shelf. As we worked, Mom explained how the scam usually went. The fake inspectors would identify wealthy or vulnerable targets, plant surveillance, then stage break-ins or even full-scale home invasions once they knew the best times to strike. She said most of the victims never even realized they'd been watched for days beforehand. It sent chills down my spine thinking about how close we came to being another quiet headline buried in the news cycle. We were almost done when Mom's radio crackled to life. Unit 4 to command, a voice said. We've got 2 more fakes in custody. Caught them trying to access a gated property 3 streets over. Over. Mom gave me a sharp look. It's not just those 2. It's a whole team. That was when the reality of how big this operation might be hit me. It wasn't just a couple of low-life thieves playing dress-up. It was organized. It was structured. And worse, it meant that someone, somewhere higher up, was giving the orders. Mom turned back to her monitors, flipping through images of the 2 we caught earlier. She zoomed in on their fake IDs, scanned their faces through a database, and cursed under her breath. Figures, she muttered. Both of them are tied to a bigger fraud network out of 3 states over. This isn't their first rodeo. She sat back heavily in her chair and rubbed her forehead. For the first time all day, she looked tired. Not physically, she could still probably outrun me in a dead sprint, but mentally, the weight of it all was pressing down. I sat down next to her and said, "So what do we do next?" "Wait for them to lawyer up and walk." Mom chuckled dryly. "Oh, they'll try. But lucky for us, they broke into a federally surveilled property. That's not just breaking and entering. That's a stack of federal charges thick enough to crush them." She leaned forward, tapping a printed sheet pinned to the corkboard, the one labeled Operation HOA Sting. Underneath it, handwritten in red ink, was one word: closure. She didn't have to explain it. I understood. This wasn't just about today's arrest. It was about pulling apart the whole operation, piece by piece, until there was nothing left. As if sensing the moment needed lightening up, Mom stood and tossed me a bag of chips from the snack shelf. "You earned it, Agent Junior," she said with a wink. I laughed, tearing the bag open. For the first time that day, I finally relaxed a little. It wasn't over yet. Not even close. But for now, we had the upper hand. And somehow, I had a feeling that when the next phase hit, things were going to get even crazier. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of burnt toast and the sound of Mom pacing upstairs. I stumbled out of bed and found her already dressed in jeans and a tactical fleece, cell phone pressed to her ear, a scowl carved deep across her face. She wasn't using her regular voice either. This was her FBI voice, sharp and clipped, the one that meant she was laying down orders or preparing for something serious. I rubbed the sleep from my eyes and grabbed a slice of barely edible toast off the counter. Before I could even ask what was going on, she ended the call and tossed her phone on the table with a sigh that could have knocked the wind out of a sailboat. Turns out, yesterday's arrests triggered a domino effect. As soon as the news spread that 2 of the main operatives had been busted, the rest of their crew panicked. Some of them tried to run, while others tried to destroy evidence. It was a full-blown scramble, and the FBI was scrambling right back to catch them before anything critical disappeared. According to Mom, the fake HOA front wasn't just about theft and surveillance. It was tied to a massive identity theft ring. They had stolen bank information, home security codes, credit card numbers, and even sensitive personal records from dozens of unsuspecting families across the region. What had started as 2 idiots barging into our living room had unraveled into something massive. And my house, my dumb little house where I spent most weekends avoiding chores, had been the fuse that lit the whole thing. Mom motioned for me to follow her back to the basement where the main FBI team had set up a temporary command center overnight. The room buzzed with quiet intensity. A whiteboard listed addresses, names, and red flag target. Agents in plain clothes worked the laptops and radios, coordinating pickups, checking databases, updating files. It didn't feel like my house anymore. It felt like the nerve center of a war room. In the middle of it all, Mom stood like a general surveying the battlefield. She briefed me quickly. The plan was simple but risky. Another pair of fake inspectors was still active in the neighborhood, trying to finish what their busted teammates had started. Instead of letting them vanish into thin air, the FBI decided to turn the tables. They would let them think they had found an easy new target. Only this time, the target would be a fully wired, fully monitored house just down the street, a decoy staged to look vulnerable but actually bristling with hidden cameras, listening devices, and undercover agents. It would be a controlled sting operation designed to catch them red-handed. Mom needed me to help stage the setup. Not because she needed more manpower, but because the criminals had already seen me during the first raid. If I walked past the decoy house like I lived there, maybe tossed a trash bag in the bin or mowed a strip of lawn, it would add just enough realism to convince the fakes they were casing the right place. I swallowed hard, realizing that this wasn't a video game or a practice drill. This was real. These were dangerous people, and I was about to be bait. But then I caught Mom's steady gaze, the absolute confidence radiating from her, and I knew I couldn't say no. I nodded. What do I have to do? An hour later, I found myself in a hoodie and jeans, pushing a rickety old lawnmower across the patchy front yard of the decoy house. My heart pounded so loudly in my ears that I barely heard the mower's engine. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the black SUV parked casually down the street where Mom and the team monitored every second. I could imagine her voice in my earpiece if I had one. Stay cool, stay natural, don't blow it. I tried to hum a random tune to calm myself, pretending to struggle with the mower like any regular suburban kid forced to do chores on a Sunday. It didn't take long before they showed up. A white van with tinted windows rolled slowly past the house once, then again. The second time, it parked half a block down. 2 men stepped out, wearing the same cheap, HOA inspector outfits we had seen before, right down to the flimsy clipboards and the knockoff earpieces. My palms went sweaty as they started walking toward me, big fake smiles plastered on their faces. One of them gave a friendly wave, which somehow made it all feel even more threatening. I waved back awkwardly and kept mowing, heart hammering in my chest. They knocked on the door of the decoy house. No answer, of course. It was supposed to look like no one was home. One of them glanced around casually, trying to look innocent but failing miserably. Then he pulled something out of his back pocket, a set of lockpicking tools. He crouched low and started working on the front door, while the other one kept watch. I kept my head down, pretending to be too busy wrestling with the mower to notice. It took every ounce of self-control not to sprint away or start screaming. In the SUV, Mom and the backup team were already moving. She spoke into her radio, voice low and urgent. "Green light. Move. Move." The instant the fake inspector clicked the door open and started to step inside, the trap was sprung. Plainclothes agents swarmed in from every direction. 2 black SUVs peeled out from side street. Doors slammed. Shouts filled the air. "FBI! Hands in the air!" The fake inspectors froze, stunned, caught so badly they looked like malfunctioning robots. One dropped his lockpick set and bolted across the lawn, but he didn't get far. An agent tackled him flat into a flower bed. The other dropped to his knees and put his hands behind his head, whimpering something about just doing what I was told. I abandoned the mower and ran toward Mom as she cuffed the guy who had tried to pick the door. She looked up at me briefly, eyes flashing with pride and fierce relief. "Good job, kid," she said. My legs were shaking so badly I could barely stand, but I grinned like a maniac anyway. The agents quickly searched the white van and found laptops, lists of addresses, fake IDs, even disguises, wigs, hats, fake mustaches, the whole pathetic criminal circus. It was more than enough to charge them with conspiracy, burglary, attempted identity theft, and a half-dozen other felonies. Back at the house, the adrenaline finally crashed out of me, leaving me slumped on the living room floor, breathing like I'd just run a marathon. Mom tossed me a bottle of water and sat down next to me. For a few minutes, neither of us spoke. We just sat there, listening to the buzz of radios, the muted conversations of agents packing up gear, the distant rumble of the last SUV pulling away. Then Mom nudged me with her elbow and said, "You know, most kids your age get grounded for lying about chores. You get drafted into FBI sting operations." I laughed so hard I almost choked on my water, and for the first time since this insane ordeal started, I let myself relax a little, knowing we had struck a major blow against the fake HOA empire. But deep down, I also knew it wasn't over yet. If there was anything this experience had taught me, it was that criminals were like weeds. You could cut down a few, but somewhere out there, more were waiting to sprout. Later that afternoon, the real shockwaves began to hit the neighborhood. News crews rolled into the subdivision with their satellite trucks and cameras. By evening, it seemed like every local station was broadcasting live from our front yard. Reporters with perfect hair and serious voices explained how a fake HOA scam ring had been using forged inspections to burglarize homes across the county. Neighbors I barely knew before suddenly acted like we were best friends, all coming by with casseroles, questions, and gossip. Everyone wanted the inside scoop. The strangest part was watching my mom, who had spent her entire life avoiding the spotlight, standing there calmly while a dozen microphones were shoved in her face. She gave a short statement, just the basics, carefully sidestepping anything classified. She thanked the community for their vigilance, stressed the importance of checking identification, and warned everyone that the case was still unfolding. She didn't smile once, didn't crack a joke, didn't let slip even a hint of how deep the operation really went. To anyone else, she looked like a no-nonsense law enforcement agent doing her job. To me, she looked like the calm eye in the middle of a brewing storm. Because behind the scenes, things were getting uglier by the hour. After digging through the computers seized from the white van, the FBI discovered something far worse than anyone had guessed. The scam wasn't just a rogue operation by a few fake inspectors. It turned out that a handful of real HOA board members from nearby neighborhoods had been helping the criminals all along, feeding them resident directories, property layouts, and private security codes in exchange for a cut of the profit. The HOA wasn't just guilty of negligence. Parts of it were actively involved in selling out their own neighbors. The FBI quickly issued subpoenas, and within hours, agents had stormed the HOA office for our neighborhood and a few others. They seized boxes of documents, hard drives, and even a hidden folder on the HOA president's computer labeled consulting fees, which turned out to be a ledger of illegal kickbacks disguised as administrative expenses. Watching the president get let out of his office in handcuffs, face redder than a tomato, was something I wished I could frame and hang on the wall. He kept shouting about misunderstandings and legal reviews, but no one cared. The damage was done. The news stations replayed the footage over and over, each time more brutal than the last. At an emergency town hall meeting hastily arranged at the community center that night, things truly exploded. Residents packed into the hall, their faces twisted with rage, fear, and confusion. The mayor showed up, local police stood watch at the doors, and a tired-looking city councilwoman tried to calm everyone down. It didn't work. People demanded answers, demanded resignations, demanded blood. One old man in a fishing hat stood up and shouted, "How the hell do we trust anyone after this? You let criminals walk through our front doors." His words hung heavy in the air, a weight that no apology could lift. Mom was there too, standing quietly at the back of the room, arms crossed, watching everything unfold. A few people tried to point fingers at the FBI, suggesting that maybe the government had used the neighborhood as bait. Mom didn't even blink. She stepped forward and addressed the crowd with the calm, unshakable authority that only someone who spent their life hunting criminals could command. She explained, patiently but firmly, that the scam had been happening long before the FBI got involved. That the neighborhood hadn't been a target because of the investigation. It had been a target because the HOA leadership had opened the door and let the wolves in. Her words didn't magically fix everything, but they shifted the mood. People realized where the real blame lay. Angry residents turned their fire back on the now disgraced HOA officials, demanding an immediate reorganization. A recall vote was scheduled for the following week. Petitions flew around faster than anyone could count. By the end of the night, the entire neighborhood had essentially declared independence from the existing HOA. Walking back to the house with Mom afterward, I asked her if she thought things would ever go back to normal. She gave a tired laugh and said, "Normal's just what you think exists before you know better." I didn't totally understand it then, but I would soon enough. The next morning brought another unexpected twist. A lawyer representing a group of residents announced they were filing a massive civil lawsuit against the old HOA board members for negligence, breach of fiduciary duty, and emotional distress. Class action. Millions of dollars on the line. The very people who had sold out their neighbors were now going to get buried in legal fees, court dates, and public humiliation. Karma had decided to show up with a baseball bat. Meanwhile, back at home, the FBI task force used our basement as mission control for the next phase. They started cross-referencing all the stolen data, tracking down victims in other neighborhoods, building a bigger web of connections. Every day, more names popped up. More arrests. More news reports. It felt like watching the credits of a movie roll by, except the list of villains never seemed to end. It wasn't all doom and gloom though. As the dust started to settle, something remarkable happened in the neighborhood. People who had barely spoken before started organizing real community watch group. Homeowners compared security footage, shared safety tips, even hosted backyard barbecues just to check in on each other. What had been a collection of strangers living side by side turned into a real community, bonded not by property lines or HOA rules, but by shared survival and a stubborn refusal to be victims. Mom became a local legend, whether she wanted to or not. People waved at her when she walked the dog. Kids rode past on bikes yelling, "Thanks, FBI lady." She pretended to grumble about the attention, but I caught her smiling more than once when she thought no one was looking. For me, it was a strange new world too. Teachers at school asked me about the incident, like I was some kind of expert. Friends kept joking that if I ever ran into trouble, I could just call the feds from my living room. Part of me enjoyed the attention. But another part knew it came with a heavy truth. Not every danger looks like a villain in a movie. Sometimes it looks like a neighbor, a clipboard, a smile. And as much as I wanted to pretend it was all over, I knew there was still one piece left to fall into place. Mom wasn't celebrating yet. She was still digging, still connecting dots on that huge corkboard in the basement. She had a feeling, a gut instinct she trusted more than anything else, that the real mastermind behind the whole operation had not yet shown their face. And when they did, it would be our turn to knock on their door. It took almost a full week before the final piece of the puzzle came into view. Life in the neighborhood slowly started to feel normal again, at least on the surface. Kids played outside, people walked their dogs, the scent of fresh-cut grass returned. But beneath that calm, the FBI task force was still working around the clock, sifting through every scrap of evidence the fake inspectors and their HOA collaborators had left behind. I spent most afternoons downstairs helping Mom with small tasks, organizing files, flagging names, anything to feel like I was part of it. She never treated me like a kid during those hours. She treated me like a partner, like someone she trusted, and I took that responsibility seriously. One evening, while Mom and a couple of her team members reviewed call logs found on one of the confiscated phones, something finally clicked. A single number kept popping up, hidden under different contact names across different devices. A number that wasn't tied to any of the idiots they had arrested so far. Mom's instincts sharpened instantly. Whoever was behind that number was the one pulling the strings, the real boss. And they were still out there, thinking they were safe, thinking they were invisible. But they had made a mistake. They had called their operatives too often, left just enough digital breadcrumbs for someone like Mom to track them down. It didn't take long for the agents to trace the number to a burner phone purchased 2 towns over. But the real surprise came when they cross-referenced the store's security footage with DMV record. The face they found wasn't some career criminal, some shadowy gangster. It was someone a lot closer to home. It was Gregory Hale, a man who had lived in the neighborhood for over a decade, someone who had once been the vice president of the original HOA board. A man who had resigned quietly 2 years earlier, citing personal reasons. In reality, he had been laying the groundwork for the entire operation, using his knowledge of the HOA system and resident vulnerabilities to create a perfect criminal pipeline. I remembered Gregory. He had come to our house once or twice, always smiling too wide, always talking a little too fast. I remembered how he would pat me on the shoulder and tell me to enjoy my youth before the real world crushed me. I used to think he was just awkward. Now I realized he had been casing our home even back then, memorizing the layout, learning who we were. The thought made my skin crawl. Mom's team put together a plan within hours. No loud arrests this time. No media circus. They would catch Gregory the right way, the federal way, with overwhelming evidence and no chance of escape. A plainclothes team staked out his modest house at the edge of the neighborhood, watching his every move. Gregory went about his day like any other suburban dad, jogging in the morning, watering his plants, chatting with neighbors. But underneath that normal routine was a man who had spent years profiting off betrayal and fear. And he was about to get a visit he would never forget. The next morning, I watched from the living room window as it all went down. A single unmarked SUV pulled up to the curb. 4 agents in casual clothes got out and approached the house calmly, confidently. Gregory opened the door with a puzzled smile, probably expecting a delivery or another neighborly chat. That smile vanished the moment they showed him the warrant. In seconds they had him cuffed, his rights read, his house being searched. He didn't fight. He didn't argue. He just sagged against the doorframe like all the air had been sucked out of him. I realized then that deep down, he had known this day was coming. He had just hoped it wouldn't. Later, Mom told me that Gregory had folded almost immediately during questioning. Faced with mountains of evidence and no allies left to protect him, he confessed everything. How he had recruited the fake inspectors, how he had coached real HOA officials into helping, how he had created fake fines and inspections to cover their tracks. It had all started because he had fallen into debt after losing a big real estate deal, and instead of getting help or starting over, he had decided to take the coward's path. He had built a criminal empire out of desperation, greed, and betrayal. Hearing all of it made me sick. But it also made me grateful. Grateful that Mom had been there, that she had seen through the lies, that she had protected not just me but everyone in our community. She didn't say much about it, didn't brag or lecture. She just finished the report, filed the paperwork, and moved on to the next task like always. For her, it wasn't about medals or news stories. It was about doing the job right. A week later, the neighborhood threw a huge block party. Not just to celebrate Gregory's arrest, but to celebrate the survival of the community itself. There were food trucks, live music, lawn games. For the first time in a long while, there was real laughter in the air. People no longer looked over their shoulders wondering who might be spying on them. They smiled, they joked, they shared stories. They were neighbors again. Mom tried to hang back, but the residents wouldn't let her. They dragged her into the center of the park, presenting her with a giant homemade banner that read, "Thank you, our real protector." Someone handed her a basket of cookies, another handed her a bouquet of flowers. She blushed, which I didn't think was even possible, and gave a tiny embarrassed wave. I caught her eye from the edge of the crowd, and she rolled her eyes dramatically, but I knew she was secretly touched. As the sun set and fireworks lit up the sky, I sat on the grass next to Mom, sharing a giant bag of kettle corn. She leaned back, hands behind her head, watching the bursts of color explode overhead. After a while, she said quietly, almost to herself, "Not bad for a week's work." I laughed and threw a handful of popcorn at her, which she caught without even looking. That night, as I lay in bed listening to the last distant pops of fireworks, I thought about everything that had happened. About how close we had come to losing everything without even knowing it. About how much stronger we had become because of it. And about how sometimes the people you least expect are the ones you have to thank for saving your world. In the end, it wasn't the HOA or the police or the city council that protected us. It was a mom who kept a Glock under her sweatshirt and a warrant in her back pocket. It was neighbors who chose to fight back instead of hiding. It was the understanding that real community doesn't come from rules or regulations. It comes from trust. And sometimes, just sometimes, it comes with a little bit of popcorn and a whole lot of firepower.